This season, Diamond reached a point where I was more uninterested in him than anything else, which is unfortunate considering he was a favorite at one point. But in the end, his intense devotion to his brother brought him to the precise location where we will abandon him, bleeding out on the ground. In the end, Diamond was more devoted to Jenard than he ever would have been to him, despite the fact that Power is fundamentally a program about family and that we have repeatedly witnessed family members turn on one another to protect their own self-interests. You will never persuade me that Jenard would ever genuinely have Diamond's best interests at heart, even though he may not have actually killed Diamond. We now know exactly what Diamond would do, but would Jenard have done the same? Jenard already wanted Tommy deader than dead, but I assume the finale will see him on a radical mission to make it happen because he's going to be feeling as much guilt as someone like Jenard can feel. Even though it's not what Tommy desired, a dead Diamond is undoubtedly a victory for him. It destroys CBI, further destabilizes the coalition, and perhaps deter Ortega and the cartel. Tommy's position is strengthened even if he had no intention of killing Diamond in that chapel. And that makes me anxious as we approach the last hour. I'm beginning to worry that they might pull the rug out from under us by tricking us into believing that Tommy would succeed in spite of all the odds. Can you even imagine Vic being the one to end Tommy? It makes me physically ill. But things are going a little too well right now, to the point where you know it can't stay that way. Tommy ending up in jail would be the absolute worst-case scenario for me because that's never been what these shows have been about. The threat of proper punishment has always lingered along the periphery, and if they were ever to send someone to jail for life, you'd do it in the series finale, but that would not be befitting for a gut like Tommy. He'd rather die than rot away in prison. When it's all over, where will it leave him? Tommy Egan's death is difficult for me to comprehend, yet when I watched Ghost and Tommy in Power Season 1, I never would have predicted how the narrative would conclude. With an hour remaining, it seems as though Tommy Egan will either receive everything he has ever desired or his previous transgressions will be brought back to haunt him. When Kate eventually returns to town, we bury JP, are jumped by Jenard, and learn that Mireya intends to depart. What a day! All things considered, this hour showed you just how complicated Tommy's life currently was, as the man barely had time to grieve his brother. It's not like Tommy has ever been super big on dealing with his feelings in any healthy manner, as he typically deals with all forms of heartbreak or injustice by killing someone. But he honestly didn't even have time to say a few kind words about JP before he was back out of it, because Ortega was still coming for him, Jenard was walking around Chicago unscathed, and Cho was still waiting on his money. When Tommy, Miguel, Shanti, and an emotionally volatile D-Mac had their little meeting, it dawned on me just how many moving parts are still in play at this point of the season. With only one more hour left to go, they couldn't head into it with so many loose threads because they wouldn't have been able to adequately address everything satisfyingly. So, something had to give. And that something was the Sampson brothers. Now, that's not to say that taking the time during this hour to dive into the brothers' complex past means that everything in the finale will suddenly end the way we want it to, or in a way that leaves us fulfilled. However, it was still an essential part of the story that deserved a proper wrap-up, and I'd say they mostly succeeded there. When you look back on the relationship between Diamond and Jenard, there may be multiple things that come to mind first. For me, I think of Power Book 4, for Season 1 Episode 1, when Diamond left prison, and Jenard was waiting for him, happy as could be. Moment that he is blind to the actual snakes that are already setting up camp in his lawn. It took him a minute to realize that Vic was lying to him, but once he did, he made the decision that keeping Vic alive was more important than killing him, a risk that may ultimately pay off. Vic is a lone wolf with very nothing to look forward to in life, but he is also the least trustworthy guy on this show, which is really saying something. The one little thing he had going for him was getting out of town and starting a new life. And that was taken from him by Tommy and Diamond. So it's either work with them or live with the guilt when they go after Beth shortly before they put him down for good. Tommy's taking a risk with Vic, but he's also met a million Vics before. His back is against the wall, and growing up the way he did, if you're going to be someone's little snitch, it's better to be working for Tommy and Diamond than the ops. Plus, if he gets enough on Stacy, maybe Tommy will give him more of a break. It's not likely, but it's worth a shot if you're Vic. Having an ear inside the task force felt like a familiar power trope. Still, it's slightly different this time because Vic doesn't really know much, but just feeding Stacy fake information and then feeding Tommy real information set off a crazy ripple effect that's going to last for a while. Vic's got himself into quite a predicament, though, because Stacy's not dumb, and it's not as if Tommy ultimately cares in the end if he gets caught by her and she sends him to jail or does whatever. He'll use Vic for as long as he can and then discard him when he's no longer useful. And for that reason alone, you'd think that would make Vic want to sabotage Tommy in some way, but we've seen how Tommy versus Vic has historically gone, and so has Vic. Trying to get leverage on Stacy is the correct play, and she may not realize it, but her political aspirations are likely to cause more trouble for her professionally. And that's on top of the way it's torpedoed her personal life. Well, that's not actually fair. When that marriage between Stacy and Bobby was pretty much DOA from the minute it was introduced to us, we don't get a ton of the couple, but when we do, it's evident that Stacy's ambitions and control issues played a significant role in the decline of their marriage. The fact that Bobby was sitting across from her, still wanting to make it work if she would give him an inch, should tell you everything you need to know about that union. It's an interesting way of approaching the story at what amounts to the 1/3 point, as there are only 10 episodes in the final season. On one hand, audiences love seeing Tommy Egan in action, as they should. There's a reason he got his own spin-off. Joseph Sikora is brilliant at chewing the scenery, particularly when Tommy and the Serbians find Ortega's uncle Luis and proceed to throw him out a window. There's always been a certain theatricality to Tommy, and Sikora makes these scenes memorable. He's a larger-than-life character and the viewers want to see him not just succeed, but succeed in style. But having Tommy succeed for the most part, unless one counts the United Kings pulling out of the coalition, runs the risk of making him seem infallible. Power Book 4 Force tries to counteract that by lining up some more dominoes against Tommy and CBI, starting the process of connecting a few dots. The cartel is the major player here in a few ways. Ortega finds out that Claudia is working with Tommy and thus ends his deal with her. After Luis' unfortunate death, Ortega and Miguel team up over their mutual hatred of Tommy. And it's revealed at the end that a USA bill sang is in Ortega's pocket, too, having undermined Stacy Mark's case with the small act of making an intentional typo on a search warrant. Other characters suffer in different ways, too. Stacy makes her first public appearance as a mayoral candidate, and immediately gets hit with questions about her imminent divorce that was revealed in the previous episode. The party rep makes clear that Stacy's candidacy now depends on the outcome of the Ortega case, which Power fans know will only inspire Stacy to be even more ruthless. Diamond gets an unexpected visit from his ex-girlfriend Gianna, which just turns out to be a bittersweet aside, because he tells her that he's not good for her. Isaac Keys plays a relatively brief moment so well, audiences see a chance at a different life for Diamond, literally walking out the door when Gianna leaves. The Starz drama's descent into hell is solidified in Season 3, Episode 8. Naturally, Build Back Better must take its time setting the new standard. The authors are unable to split Tommy and Diamond and simply move on. This episode discusses the consequences that are present everywhere. However, this script is unsatisfied, just like all the Force characters, therefore it must make matters worse. First, the obvious. Tommy's breakup with Diamond solidifies Diamond and Jenard as the piece's new antagonists. Diamond's actions in this episode demonstrate that it is impossible for the audience to continue supporting him because he is now only concerned with himself. The best illustration of this is when he orders Jenard to simply follow instructions, although Diamond laments being Tommy's subordinate, it's obvious that he views Jenard as inferior to him. To be fair to Diamond, Jenard's actions in Episode 8 demonstrate that he is unfit to handle a paper bag. However, Diamond Sampson's heel turn has fully materialized and is breathtaking. As a result, Tommy's two worst adversaries in the Force Season 3 opener are now his two most significant allies. Guys and holdups are thrilling, but tough guys, and gals, on TV are a dime a dozen. Being reminded that these characters are three-dimensional people, beyond whatever they're plotting next, ensures that viewers care and aren't just keeping score. That being said, there are 2 drive-by shootings, a warehouse fire and a beheading in A Seat at the Table. Power Book 4, Force is not skimping on the action in its final season. Tommy walking into a coalition meeting holding up a severed head is probably a top 10 Tommy Egan moment, and Joseph Sikora sells the daylights out of the accompanying monologue to back up the visual emphatically. This episode states, out loud and repeatedly, how many people believe Tommy is a liability. This isn't unexpected. Even in Season 3, the stage has to be set for Tommy to have one last epic battle, and that means people have to turn against him. The threats don't stop. But after setting the stage and re-establishing all the rivalries in the Season 3 premiere, Episode 2 is wise to similarly remind viewers that Power Book 4, Force has more going for it than the drug dealing. From Tommy and Mireya, to Stacy and Bobby, to even Vic reuniting with Beth, there are emotional stakes as well and relationships that audience members can invest in. Some of them are absolutely going to fall apart and some of these people won't survive, but Force is like Tommy Egan, it has a lot more layers than it's given credit for. The Starz drama's descent into hell is solidified in Season 3, Episode 8. Naturally, Build Back Better must take its time setting the new standard. The authors are unable to split Tommy and Diamond and simply move on. This episode discusses the consequences that are present everywhere. However, this script is unsatisfied, just like all the Force characters, therefore it must make matters worse. First, the obvious, Tommy's breakup with Diamond solidifies Diamond and Jenard as the piece's new antagonists. Diamond's actions in this episode demonstrate that it is impossible for the audience to continue supporting him because he is now only concerned with himself. The best illustration of this is when he orders Jenard to simply follow instructions, though Diamond laments being Tommy's subordinate, it's obvious that he views Jenard as inferior to him. To be fair to Diamond, Jenard's actions in Episode 8 demonstrate that he is unfit to handle a paper bag. However, Diamond Sampson's heel turn has fully materialized and is breathtaking. As a result, Tommy's 2 worst adversaries in the Force Season 3 opener are now his 2 most significant allies. I knew we were headed toward Tommy and Miguel teaming up, and it's not really for Mireya's benefit, but more because they face the same threats. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, or whatever they say. Mireya's brush with death should have been a major wake-up call for her, but she seems hellbent on making things work with Tommy, even if she's slowly turning into the exact person she never wanted to be as someone who's been around this life for years. I'm not sure why she or Tommy thinks she can just walk around and go to work like the streets aren't popping and Tommy isn't under constant attack. Tommy is many things, but he's not naive, and sure, she got the upper hand on Marquez's hitman, but that was luck more than anything else. The next time, she may not be so lucky. She's wanted Tommy and Miguel on the same page, but now that she's got it, what does it actually mean? I trust these 2 putting aside their differences for the greater good, but I struggle to see both making it out of the season alive, so it may all be for naught in the end. Tommy's new partner, Shanti in particular, makes a well-earned move, and since Miguel and Tommy are now related, it's not surprising that Tommy ends up with Miguel. Build Back Better seems to be partially designed to show why Tommy and Miguel form a team, and it succeeds in that regard. Even when the result is clear, the audience is nonetheless aware that it is the proper thing to do. However, the remainder of the event exemplifies the adage every man for himself. Vic Flynn, for example, confronts Tommy only to get himself arrested by Stacy's husband Bobby, who himself threatens Tommy on the way out. If one took a shot for every time Tommy Egan was threatened in this episode, one would end it slightly tipsy. Power Book 4, Force viewers know that JP is not long for the world. Anyone who does what they're explicitly told not to do usually isn't. But it's still an emotional moment to see JP stand up for his son, doubly so because Jenard needs someone to bring him down a notch. And even in his death scene as Jenard and King Kilo threaten him, JP maintains his dignity and his loyalty. The past 2 hours have felt like a fever dream with these murders. First Stacy, then Diamond just goes full demon by killing Kendra, and then Jenard gets a 3-for-1 special, killing JP, King Kilo, and that other man, all because he was disrespected and not in his right mind. The old Diamond would have been frustrated that Jenard got them into some mess, but Diamond was being messy as well. Plus, Shanti finally spilled to Diamond that Jenard was totally on board with the plan to get rid of him, and I hope Diamond walked away from the ring feeling real silly for putting all his trust in Jenard. Now that Diamond knows the truth, I have to wonder if the next subsequent big death will be one killing the other. Not to get all biblical, but Diamond and Jenard are very much Cain and Abel coded. Diamond's the chosen one, and Jenard's always been in his shadow, and we're beyond Jenard being just jealous and resentful. It's a secret thing that may be more dangerous than the two,